Welcome to the Gray Path Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tony B. Today, we're here with two of my really good friends, and we are going to tackle a very sensitive and deep topic, especially for this show. We're going to have a whole episode dedicated to depression and suicide. Now, of course, this is no laughing matter. This isn't something we're doing to make fun of or to joke about. We're going to have a real, honest discussion about depression, suicide, and the role that it has had in our individual lives. Now, if you or anyone you know is suffering from depression or is having suicidal thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and that's 1-800-273-8255. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce my friends here. This is my buddy JJ, a gentleman I've known for quite a long time, who has frequently punched me in the face and choked me out.
But for fun.
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 And this is my sister-in-arms, Bethany. And we met, ironically, through a Comic-Con, which will be, 3-4 years ago now? I can't even remember.
2018.
2018, so 3 years ago now, at Sci-Fi ValleyCon in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which we will be returning to.
Yay.
Got postponed a little bit because of the pandemic, but we'll be back in October. So I'm going to give you guys a chance here. Go ahead and kind of introduce yourselves, and then we're going to kind of go from there.
I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. Like you said, I met this, we pretty much met doing a lot of martial arts, and that we've been training jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing for quite a few years now, and he's the one that basically beat the shit out of me during my black belt test, who I then had to promptly kick in the head.
Out of love.
Out of love.
Out of love.
It was just so fun. It's like, his idea of pumping somebody up is hitting them. My idea of pumping somebody up is not hitting them. So he promptly punches me in the gut. I lose, a good deal of my breath. I'm gassing for air.
But, in your defense, or I guess in my own defense, that would have motivated me. And you did almost knock me out with a head kick 20 seconds later. So,
And it was all in martial arts setting. Every good student, you need an uke for your test.
Exactly.
This was after I was sparring 20 minutes earlier against several other different people who were fresh. This is basically what the test was.
Think of the story.
Yeah, but the story is also, let's do this, punch. Oh, fuck my life. Everything hurts and I don't want to be here anymore. Fuck you, I'll kick you in the head.
To quote The Hangover, did you die?
I really felt like I did.
Then let's move on.
Yes, Bethany.
Well, I've met you guys, 3 years ago now?
3 years ago.
We've been swinging sticks at each other since?
As far as I can remember, I was standing at the stand for Saber School, and I hear, Saber! And you just come running over, and we talked for a solid hour on...
Listen, I was very excited. I'm a theater kid. I recently, gosh, it's been 7 years now, got introduced to stage combat, and then I finally found people who were within a driving distance that was reasonable that actually did fight choreography kind of stuff, and I got real excited. When I get real excited, things like that happen. So, kind of going on with my introduction, I am very excitable. I am quite a nerdy kid. I play D&D, I like Star Wars, I like fight choreography, I love theater. Gosh, I'm kind of I work in IT. I'm pretty sure if you had a checklist for stereotypical nerd, I kind of check all the boxes, and I'm very proud of it. I love it. I love everything that I'm into, obviously, or else I wouldn't be into them.
Who are we going to typecast as the nerd on the show? Bethany? Never fit. Never fit.
Never fit. It won't work. It just won't work. I also make short films in my free time, which I don't know what that is half the time. And I play competitive paintball. So that's
so we're some well-rounded individuals.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So as I introduced at the beginning of the episode, we are, of course, going to talk about depression. We're going to talk about suicide. We're going to talk about our own personal philosophies and roles and interactions with that. And, it's difficult topic, but I actually feel that that's kind of the reason that spurred the creation of this episode. There's so much stigma about depression. Specifically, there's so much stigma in our society. No one's supposed to talk about being depressed. No one's supposed to talk about suicidal thoughts.
So much so that people like me will avoid getting help altogether because of that stigma.
And I don't even think it's just people like you, JJ. I think it's people in general. I mean, you see, and I don't want to get political on this show, but you see a lot of talk, not just in the news media, but just in the world, in society in general, about how specifically men have a hard time being open about depression and suicidal thoughts. And it's a shame because you're not alone in the sense that there's a lot of people who don't get help or don't have these conversations because they're made to think that they're going to be weak or that that's just not the manly thing to do.
Yeah, just rub some dirt in it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's my goal today is to facilitate an honest conversation, and I plan to interject as needed to explain my relationship with it as well. So why don't we kind of just go around the table? We'll start with Bethany. We'll end with me. Why don't we kind of go around the table and just kind of discuss the role of depression in your life?
Well, for me, I've struggled with, I don't struggle with it as much anymore as I used to, but I used to be very bipolar, and my lows would be very low, and my highs would be kind of normal. So depression for me has just been, as I've gotten older, depression for me now is kind of a motivator in a weird sense. I look at my past and I've seen things that I've been through and I've seen the rough times that I've been through, and I'm like, you know what, if I can get through that, I can get through anything. So it's almost like an empowering, not device, but emotion, I guess. And unfortunately when you're in it, it's hard to see. You're in that box and you're like, man, I can't see anything outside of this box. But when you're feeling good and you're outside of your box, because, I mean, let's be real here, we all have bad days.
Yes.
It's not, you can still be depressed and have good days. Like it's not a black and white kind of thing. It's a lot of gray.
So let's pause here. So you're saying that it's gray.
It is.
You're interesting.
Yeah. We'll just that was just It's not a very black and white thing. You can have, just because you're depressed doesn't mean I'm sad and I'm not wanting to do anything every single day. It's a, hey, I don't want to do housework today. I don't want to get out of bed today. I don't know. I don't want to see anybody today. Which, for me, that's a pretty telltale sign, like something's up.
Better check on Bethany. She doesn't want to talk.
Yeah. If I don't want to talk, I'm very much the extrovert. If you're extroverts, shut up. Please check on them. Because there might be something wrong. But yeah, so it's kind of been an interesting presence throughout my life, but I think as I've gotten older, it's been empowering and motivating. Even though when I'm having a bad day, that all goes out the window. Like, I can say that now because I'm having a really great day, but tomorrow, who knows?
All bets could be off.
All bets could be off.
It's funny you bring that up because I think a lot of times depression just comes in episodes. At least it definitely does for me. It's not always a lasting feeling, and I have gotten to a point where I can recognize, oh, this is an episode. I will eventually get through this, but I can kind of talk myself, pun intended, off the cliff. Mm-hmm. But it is funny that you were talking about before, because I remember reading in a book about how things, like when you're in the box, it's not as clear when you're seeing from the outside in. Mm-hmm. And it's always funny, like people bring up questions like, how do I break up with this person I've been in a relationship forever? And it's like, well, you just break up with them. And it's like, well, it's easier said than done. Or how do I do such that sounds so simple and easy to do, but it's the most difficult thing you can imagine doing when you're in doing it. It's always easier to give advice than to receive advice a lot of times.
I agree wholeheartedly.
100%.
So, with you, JJ, what role does depression play in your life? Not, I mean, we'll get into when we first started experiencing all that later,
Right,
but
yeah.
as far as, if you will, in the toolbox that is your everyday life, we all have tools. We can, this guy's starting shit with me, here's my Muay Thai tool. Or, this isn't working, this is my IT tool.
Yes.
Like,
Stuff is
so,
broken.
your depression tool, we all have it in our toolbox. What role does it serve in your life?
I think like what I was saying before, how I've come to learn to recognize how when I go through these periods, how it's episodical, and that I know that when I'm when I'm having like a bad spell, I guess we'll call it, I know that a good one is on the way. It's kind of that old Buddhist philosophy of if you're having a bad day, rejoice because a good day is on the horizon, and when you're having a good day, be prepared because a bad one is sure to come. So it's kind of understanding and recognizing that
It's a cyclical pattern.
pretty much, and that I now know that, again, I can talk myself out of it, as bad as it might be. I might be having a terrible day at work, and just like this past recent winter that we had, because I plow snow for a living, we had that really bad storm, and then I just had this whole big argument with my foreman, and just this whole thing, and I was just feeling so bad, but I kind of realized, like, the winter's going to be over soon. Spring is likely to come. I don't think we're going to be in a nuclear winter forever. It is Pennsylvania, but
But
spring is supposed to be here shortly. But like I said, it's knowing that good times are going to come, as hard as it might be to see them ahead of us.
okay.
So for you, it's almost like it's a self-awareness.
Pretty much. I definitely learned to be, and I think meditation definitely helped a good bit of that mindfulness of knowing how you're thinking and how, like, really, I've never understood emotional intelligence before. Before a lot of this, like recognizing what your emotions are and how we think. So I remember reading an article a long time ago about how even when you think you are being rational and logical, you are still using your emotions to think about that. So you're always thinking in an emotional sense, even if you think that you're being logical and rational about it.
Correct. Unless you're a psychopath.
Yes.
I mean, and that's the
Yeah.
truth. I mean, unless you have a disorder or something that inhibits your emotional response, it's correct. Everything that we interact with is all done through the lens of our own emotion and understanding. So,
And experiences play a big role in that, because like how you react in an experience is definitely how you're probably going to further react in the future when something similar comes back up again.
Yeah.
So understanding and recognizing that emotion as it happening it definitely helped me a lot.
yeah, I agree. It's conditioning. We condition ourselves, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending upon how we react with it. So I guess I'll go. As far as role of depression in my life, so I can remember depression first entering my life. I think it was somewhere around six or seven, which is when my mother took my sister and I. And it was at that point in time, my life changed. I had somewhat of a stable family life. That changed. Moved to a other side of the country, nobody I knew, and for lack of a better term, an absentee mother. My dad wasn't around because I was taken from him. So that was probably my first interactions with really depression. And then it's just been there ever since. I can very much relate to what you're saying as far as it's very cyclical. I don't necessarily know when it's going to come on. Like, I don't know what the onset's going to be, but I can always tell when I'm in it. And I completely relate to what you're saying. When I'm in it, like, the optimist in me is like, well, this will pass. But that's easy as shit to say.
Yeah.
But it's totally different when you're in it and you just have to keep repeating to yourself, this will pass. And mine manifests very similar to yours in the sense that I can be depressed and completely on point, charismatic Tony, and no one will know. Like, depression, and that's a very common misconception, and I think that's what hinders a lot of the conversation on is people think if you're depressed, you're Eeyore. They think you're moping around, where's my tail, life is terrible.
Yep.
But no, you're Robin Williams.
Yes, you're absolutely, you're Robin
Yeah,
fucking
jeez.
Williams.
God, why can't I remember his name? From Lincoln Park.
Yeah, you're Chester Bennington.
Chester Bennington. They
You're,
said the day before he committed suicide, he was with his family, laughing and playing
exactly.
around with his kids.
Like
There's a list of people.
Exactly. Depression oftentimes is completely silent. It's a mimic. You don't know it's happening. And that's a lot of my experience. And this is kind of a morbid thing, but I can always, and I've told you about this before, and I believe I've told you about this, I can always gauge from day in to day out the level of my depression, because I simply imagine a revolver, and it has to be a revolver because it has to have moving parts, otherwise it doesn't work.
Right.
But I imagine a revolver in front of my face, and I imagine someone like a mugger holding it there, and they pull the hammer back, and you see the cylinder rotate, and it all depends to me. I can tell where I'm at on whether or not I get out of the way. Some days I'm just resting my forehead on this imaginary gun, just wishing, kaboom. Now, would I ever self-terminate? No, it's not in me. It's just not.
Yeah.
But I think about that more often than I don't think about it. And oftentimes I get out of the way. Sometimes I, kung fu disarm it,
You McDojo that
Exactly. I McDojo the shit out of
Oh,
it.
jeez.
But I can always tell where I'm at because all I have to do is think about that. And my whole life has been these cycles, has been these periods where everything can be going great, but it creeps in.
Yep.
And it's tough because it's hard to talk to people about this. I remember you and I, when we first talked about it, we were in the parking lot to Cambria Martial Arts. I don't even know how the hell it came up. We were talking about something after practice.
I think if I remember correctly, it was probably because we brought up how we're both atheists and
Yes.
and honestly you're the first atheist person. I'm finally someone I can relate to, and I think it kind of got to the point we were talking about. It's it's tough talking to people who don't really share the same opinion because you feel isolated and alone. And
Correct.
All that can...
And then that's how it snowballed into it.
Yeah.
And it's true because this type of thing, this depression, these suicidal thoughts, I think the fact of the matter is I think everybody experiences them.
Oh, yeah.
I just think most people either don't experience them maybe to the degree that some people do, or they ignore them, or they just lie and they say they don't experience them. I'm not ashamed to admit I'm in therapy. I was talking to my therapist actually about the planning of this episode.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and I explained to her why I thought it was important to do this. And what she shared with me was interesting because she explained that she's honestly, you're right. Most people have these thoughts, and because of the stigma that sits around them, nobody fucking talks about it. And because nobody talks about it, it festers, the isolation gets worse, and then something drastic happens. I mean, there's the old adage that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I know it's cliche to say it, but if you think about it, it's true.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I remember my school that I went to in high school, they had a suicide awareness speech where a cop came in whose son committed suicide. And that was the exact thing that he said. For some reason, that always stuck in my head.
I mean, it's a very cliche saying, but it's also
but it's still
very true.
It's cliche, but it's true. Yeah.
So to kind of wrap it around to answer my own question, what role does depression play in my life? Well, depression is the dark side of my gray path. Depression is that other side of the coin. And in my opinion, and this is perhaps controversial, I think it's a needed piece. I think if you're not depressed, you're missing something. Now, that's not saying you should be going around being depressed all the time,
right.
But it's my sincere belief that that depression helps you define and appreciate when you're not in it. I mean, if you don't have a low, what's a high without a low?
It's true.
Not that there can't be extremes to it, because you can have extremes where it gets out of hand. But I feel, to me, there is, and this is something I talked to my therapist about, I'd really like to get your guys' input on it. There is a certain peace to being depressed. When I'm in my, I don't want to go anywhere, I'm in my warm PJs, I don't want to talk to anybody, I just want to sit around the house and be depressed. There's a certain peacefulness. Addiction is an interesting word. That's not one I ever would have thought of, but yeah, there's a lot of markers there. But there's a certain peacefulness to it. Now, if you sit and you do it all the time, then it doesn't become peaceful anymore. It becomes becomes shattering, world shattering.
Right.
But to me, I actually enjoy, and it's why I enjoy living in Pennsylvania. And why I say that is we're one of the few states.
Not a lot of people say that, by the way. I enjoy living in
Keep in mind,
Pennsylvania.
I left and came back.
Yeah, exactly.
So, not a lot of states have the full 4 seasons. Like, they really don't. A lot of states will have 2, 3. Some only have 1.
Up here in the Northeast, though, we
get the full gambit.
And I've actually met people that travel from like Florida up here just to experience the seasons.
Yep.
And that just blows my mind.
Wait, you want snow?
Yeah.
So I lived in Washington for a while. Washington has a summer, Washington has a winter, and it sort of has a spring, but it's an evergreen state. So there's no leaf changes. There's no fall.
Yeah.
So to me, my favorite time of year, and this ties perfectly into what we're talking about, is autumn, is fall.
Oh, yeah.
There is something about how the temperature drops. There's a stillness to the air.
Mm-hmm.
The leaves are falling, and especially where I live out here in the middle of the woods. I mean, I get 500 tons of leaves that fall.
It's that spooky weather.
It's the gray cap. So to anyone who doesn't live in a state like Pennsylvania, we have a thing we all call the gray cap here. And that's because about, 3/4 of the year, there is overcast. You don't really see the sun.
The sun
No,
does not.
it's Seattle.
It's there.
for that-
So you know how they say, was it Florida's the sunshine state? Well, if you inverse that, that's where we live.
That's Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm.
So to me, there is a peacefulness and stillness that I yearn for. It's like I'm super productive in the summer, I'm super productive in the later parts of the winter, but then it comes to be the wind down. So that's the role of depression in my life. How does that apply to you guys?
Trying to think if it's sort of similar to that or it's not.
I would just go with it anyway.
Well, like for me, when it comes to like with the peacefulness, I'm gonna keep going with my initial word that I associate with it, and it's an addiction. Because at least to me, this is my own personal opinion. This is my own personal experience. There's my disclaimer. This isn't, like I said, it's not a black or white thing. You can't just blanket it.
Yep.
It is very much a gray thing. And for me, I found in reflecting on past, which like I said, I used to get really sad and really like Eeyore and really, the thoughts that would come into my head weren't always really pretty. And, I'm in therapy, I'll admit it. And therapy, I think, works wonders. But for me, when I was in the low, I kind of wanted to keep perpetuating the low. And I don't know why. I don't know what it is about that, but when you're feeling like that and you're feeling like moody, which I don't know if that's a good word for it.
Yeah, I would go with that. Yeah.
But you see, especially as a musician, so I'm a musician as well, with art and music, you see some of your best work come out when you're feeling low, right? Like, I'm not gonna, draw up like the best song ever when I'm feeling super happy.
Well, I think there's a lot of
necessarily.
artists. Yeah, I think there's a lot of artists that they, especially like a lot of painters, they would lock themselves in a room and then just be in a state
And
of
just create.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that you're kind of along the line of that when you're in that creative mode of just lock me in, leave me be.
Yep, and there's this song that in reading articles from the person who wrote it, that's not what they intended at all. But if you listen to it, it says about like how it's kind of, you get into that and then you just get into that mindset and you get into that cycle, and sometimes it's hard to come back out. So it's partially like an addiction, and it's partially like you're drowning. Like you're just so far under, you can't come back. So, whereas it's not really peaceful. Sure, I can find peace in it, but for me it's more like, it's hard to put it into words, but it's like, well, I'm in this mind state. I don't know if I want to get out of it.
Right.
And I can appreciate that because I have those similar bouts of it where I go between. I mean, addiction is never a term I'd ever thought of in terms of that state.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's times where it's just like, it's so much easier to just binge watch TV and eat junk food and just put off the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny that you guys bring a lot of that because I was thinking a while back, when was the last time you think you really had a really good cry? Like, like those really big, like, ugly cries that you've had in your life? When was the last time you really... I was always trying to think, like, wow, when was the last time
I could tell you hands down when mine was. I immediately know when mine was. So mine was in the Ross parking lot.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Mine was in the Ross parking lot when I got the actual divorce papers.
Oh, wow.
Like the signed, sealed divorce decree.
That's fair.
Like snot running out of the
yeah, I
nose
ugly
and
cried.
Oh, yeah. I remember when me and my latest relationship, when we broke up, I remember not speeding, but going down the highway, blasting whatever music I had, probably some combination of emo and ska.
Most likely. We had banjos. There were banjos involved.
Oh, definitely some folk punk, and maybe some gangster rap in there as well.
Oh, geez.
And just screaming and singing and crying as I'm going down the highway.
But what's interesting, on both of those situations, there was a trigger.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So the question that I have then, and I know we're kind of going a little off the path.
Us on a tangent? Never.
Yeah, tangent. But
with us?
Like, good. Like, when's the last time you've had a solid cry like that without a trigger?
Does it have to be for something bad?
No.
Okay, Iceland. About a dozen fucking times.
That's fair.
Oh, like tears of joy?
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah.
When I went to Glacier Bay, or Glacier Lagoon, and saw that, I cried. When I went and saw that video I sent you guys from Glaima, the tallest waterfall in Iceland, when I had to hike across that river for, yeah. Oh yeah, tears stream. Because there's something about the journey of doing it, just the different feel of another country, actually being alone for a change. There was something about that whole experience that was cathartic is probably the best word for it, but I actually enjoy tears of joy more than I enjoy ugly cry because of bad triggers.
Makes sense.
Actually think crying is essential.
But the reason why I brought up the ugly crying was because I always remember every time I ever had a really good, and I do say good, ugly cry.
Yeah, it sounds weird.
I felt so much better. I was like,
my god,
it's cathartic.
I was like, God, I needed that. I just needed that.
It like empties your tank.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
You're so exhausted. It's like I can actually fall asleep tonight because I'm so exhausted.
To talk on another depressing topic, when my dad died, I didn't actually deal with it. I knew that it hadn't hit me until I ugly cried.
Yeah.
Because I probably went 2 weeks before I cried, and then when I cried, alcohol was a catalyst to it.
Usually is.
But,
it's a depressant.
Is.
Yeah, I mean, when the ugly cry hit me, it was important. I mean, it was cathartic. All right, so we're gonna try to get back on topic here.
But I want to hear Bethany's ugly cry story.
Oh gosh, my last ugly cry story. I've had quite a few of those in my lifetime.
Just 10 minutes ago, before I walked in here.
Probably, and I know it. And this is going to be kind of interesting. So my roommates were moving out, and which you would think was like a normal. Like I was very happy for them. It was like, yes, you guys got a house. You guys are like on your own. You guys are like engaged now. Have at. But what was interesting was, as happy as that was for them to leave, my depression / issues that I have throughout my life made me really upset, and I got really emotional because for me, they were leaving.
Oh, I see.
And for me, it was my fault that they were leaving. And they were abandoning me. And it was all coming back full circle. It's like, yeah, that's fine. You just leave like everybody else does.
I don't mean to say this to insult you. Do you think a lot of that is related to your bipolarness and a lot of like abandonment issues that you've had in the past?
So bipolarness, no.
Okay.
Abandonment issues, yes.
So if I can interject here, because this is the perfect place. Yep. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is perfect because we're going on our little roundtable thing, is how does your depression manifest?
Okay,
Boom.
well, I will continue.
Because this is
pretty solid.
exactly what the next topic was.
Yep. So, continue on with my story. So, when my roommates were working on starting to move the stuff out into the house, I was cleaning, and I'm not trying to be a stereotypical thing here, but a lot of times women, when we get upset, we clean. It's just a thing. Ladies, if you're out there, you know what I mean.
If I just may be fair, I also clean.
Me too. Me too.
It's just in my mind to do something else.
Just to say that, like, I don't mean that to say that guys don't clean when they're emotional.
No, but it's
upset.
definitely one of those things. Like, God, I'm doing that thing everybody says.
It's just one of those things that, like, so I was cleaning, and I remember specifically I was running the vacuum, and I hit the lamp, and the lampshade, it kind of comes up in a U, upside down U, so then the lampshade just kind of hangs. Well, I hit the lamp, and the lampshade came down, and I literally punted the lampshade across the room.
Wow.
And at that point, my boyfriend comes over to me, and he says, "What is wrong?"
Oh, no.
And it just started coming down. I'm like, they're leaving. This always happens. And what's weird is, kind of going into this, like, yes, I have abandonment issues, but they're very deeply rooted. It's not like everybody like I
It's not
said
there
at the
for
point,
no reason.
Yeah, right. But I said everybody leaves, but then if you think about it, I've had friends that I've had for 10, 15, 20, like 20 years. So I said that, but it in the same time, it's like, it's so deeply rooted that, like, it doesn't really happen, but in my head, it does. And, I punted the lampshade, and obviously there was something wrong, and I was just bawling. And, and that's what I told my boyfriend. I said, everybody leaves. I always screw this up. Anytime anything's good, that's another way that my stuff manifests. Like, self-sabotage is a big thing. But anyway, I was like, I screwed this up. I'm the reason that they're leaving. Why can't I do anything right? Which just ends up, you just keep going down.
Is that spiral of, I'm angry because I'm angry, or I'm frustrated because I'm frustrated,
right.
or I'm
upset because I'm upset.
Yeah, and then,
yep. Yeah, that's kind of...
and it just keeps repeating itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, like, things like that happen when we all know that in the course of our lives, it's like a train. People get on the train, people get off the train. That doesn't mean that you cause them to get off. It's just that,
this is my stop.
It was their stop, and I had a really good friend of mine. We were friends for, oh gosh, ever since, like, 7th grade. We no longer talk to each other. Because certain events, and it wasn't really my fault. But, it's hard not to, there's, like, some guilt there, too,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, well, I must have screwed this up. This had to have been me. Anytime something goes wrong in life, it's like, even if it was me, then that's, acceptable. Like, hey, you done screwed up. You have to kind of keep yourself accountable. But if things happen, and it doesn't even have to be bad. Like, my roommates moved out. It was a good thing.
Yeah, no. It's just...
And it was something that I always knew was going to come. Like, it wasn't going to be a forever thing. But, them moving out just was that, like, abandonment trigger.
That sudden realization of, and then it's related to this, and it's related to that, and it all becomes mixed pot.
So the abandonment thing, that's a big one for my depression. The other one is the self-sabotage. So for me, a lot of times when my life is going good, and my life is, like, things are going, like, absolutely awesomely, there's that voice in the back of my head that says, when are you going to screw this up?
I get that all the time.
And, like, I talked to
even now as we're doing this, I'm just thinking, it's like, what am I going to say that's going to ruin this whole whole podcasting experience?
And it's back there. And sometimes, the voice gets loud, and sometimes the voice, you can tell it to shut up. Like, a good friend of mine kind of gave me this inspirational statement one day, which he tends to do, and I don't think he even tries. He said, it's almost like you have to grow a second voice to tell the first voice to shut up, they smell bad, and go away. And sometimes that second voice, in my 30s, I'm just now starting to try to develop that second voice to tell that first voice to take a hike.
I always heard something similar to that, which was like sometimes you have to be your own parent. Where it's like sometimes you do have to treat yourself like the 5-year-old. It's like no, you can't have cookies. Eat salad or whatnot. Or it's always like sometimes you do have to parent yourself and say, hey, stop saying those things about yourself. It's not true.
And I'm going to interject here. So, and I think that is a really good point that you're bringing up there, because self-sabotage is such it's a big punch word these days, but it's such a profound problem. I think anyone with even a moderately troubled past has developed. I know I have it as well. But to come back to being your own parent, and I think that's something that I agree with you. I think everybody needs to learn that. I don't want to call it self-control. I don't know what you want to call it. Self-modulation, maybe?
I think that's a better word.
Like,
maybe.
We all need to learn to develop that second voice, because self-doubt is just par for the course. I think we all have it. Even the cockiest person in the world, in fact, probably more so the cockiest person in the world, has these periods of self-doubt and whatever, I don't even know what you want to call it, self-sabotage. So developing that voice, and not to plug therapy again, but that's, to me, everyone receives therapy in different ways. Some people go and they see a paid counselor. Some people bullshit with their friends. Some people write songs. Some people write poetry. Whatever your form of therapy is, I encourage everyone listening to this and watching this, if you don't know what your form of therapy is, find it. We all need it. Yeah. Don't think for 1 second you're too macho, too manly, too smart, too whatever for it. Whatever form yours takes, find it. Because that's how you'll develop that second voice. That's how you'll develop that parental guidance for yourself. And a lot of times, again, to come back to why I do this, a lot of times that is, we connect to these things through fictional mediums. It's just the type of people that we are, which we'll get into shortly.
I can say about how my...
Well, I was just gonna move on to you.
It's to you, buddy.
So, I think a lot of mine is like a slow... especially you as, somebody who works with insurance and everything, how floorboards and everything get ruined just by a slow drip from a water leak or something.
Me know about water damage?
It's like... Yes. Yeah, it's just a slow drip over the course of... So, I have a habit of just not talking about things that are bumming me out. I definitely am somebody who likes to bottle up, and then...
the little black bottle.
Boom! Fireworks! So,
God, I have that too!
I think a lot of people do. So,
Not this guy.
It's just confetti everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nope. I call it my little black bottle, because you never know how much is in it, and you just pop the cork off, you shove something in there, and you pop the lid back on, and then one day you just open it and just... It all comes out.
That's Pandora's box.
Why did I open this box?
Why did I open this box?
Mine's definitely like a slow drip, just wearing out the water or wooden floors. Yeah. So a lot of times,
not only just wearing out the wooden floors, but causing long-term rot.
Stuff
that you're not seeing. If we're gonna carry the analogy, let's take it the whole way. You're gonna start rot until. By the time you become aware that the rot is there, it's so extensive that you have to tear it all out
and replace it. That's pretty much what I had to do for a lot of things, because I think a lot of my depression came from this lack of, or not lack, but more of this feeling of worthlessness,
inadequacy.
Because I grew up out of a trailer home. I was very, very poor. My family was very, very poor. The only way we could make a living was either you become a miner or you become a truck driver and haul whatever
stuff from the mine.
Exactly. We live in coal country. And that's how everybody can... Towns are literally created out of the coal mines.
Yep. That's very true.
So...
Welcome to Pennsylvania.
Exactly. So I grew up out of a trailer home, very, very poor, and this feeling of like, I'm not good enough for anything because I come from this lower society. I come from this, I'm not meant to have nice things because, I'm meant to just work these blue-collar, hillbilly, Appalachian Mountain, get out there, do all the hard work for us, nicer folks. So I always had this image of myself of not feeling worthy enough of anything. So a lot of that kind of manifested in and of itself to the point where anything that happened, like terrible that happened in my life, it pretty much just reaffirmed that feeling. You know, like, you had a bad relationship. Well, of course you had a bad relationship. You're not worthy of anything. You're dead broke and you're gonna have your truck repossessed. Of course, you don't deserve a nice truck. You don't deserve anything. So a lot of that is kind of just coming to this realization of like, no, you deserve, you work hard, you deserve things, and so like you were saying before about developing that second voice of telling myself that no, you can have nice things. A lot of times these are just setbacks, and like you just grew up out of pure circumstances. Nothing like there was nothing you did like in some past life that.
Yeah, this isn't a karmic retribution.
Exactly. Like you weren't Jack the Ripper in your past life, so now you're an Appalachian hillbilly.
It's so interesting that you use the water damage with the rot, because if you think about it, like a lot of that happens, like a lot of what you know as an adult, you learned as a kid. And I'm just going to put this out here because this actually helps me, and I'm hoping that it helps you. I'm a product of my environment, and that is 120% okay.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes to like the water damage thing, like, especially if you've got any sort of troubled past, that's the drip. And then the rot is what you experience throughout your entire life.
Yeah.
And then while it's still time, you're still dripping.
Oh yeah.
I think one of the problems a lot of people have, since we're going to work with this analogy, is a lot of people don't understand that just because you found the rot, it doesn't mean you can't tear it out and lay something new back down.
Are you giving actual insurance advice right now? Or are you...
Maybe.
Remember, people, fix all your leaks.
I mean, if we're going to carry the analogy, though, it carries through because the drip is the childhood drama. Is drama. Childhood trauma, which is drama.
Yeah.
That's what the drip is. And the rot is what happens when you don't stop the drip.
Exactly.
Or
you don't address it.
You don't address it. Maybe put a bucket under it. Because who knows? Maybe the drip can never stop. But that doesn't mean there isn't ways to mitigate it.
Right.
And I think the other part, which is important to understand, especially for those who don't want to talk about this, is just because you have rot in your life, it doesn't mean it needs to be there. You know, how do you get rid of rot? You have to cut it out. You have to cut it out and cut it out surrounding it because it'll spread. But once you cut it out, there's nothing saying you can't put something new back down in its place.
Right.
So, I mean, and that, without going into a whole other episode on self-improvement, I mean, that is a really good way of thinking of it because we are 100%, anyone who says we're not is a liar. We're 100% products of our environment. You know, whatever we experience as a kid, whether it be through our parents, grandparents, siblings, friends, whatever, those interactions shaped us at that age and created the neurotic mess that we are now. And
or the happy mess that you
which is probably still neurotic, but
yeah.
At my viewpoint on it, and it's part of my personal gray path, is that for me personally, all of that bad shit, the molestation, the neglect, everything that happened to me, while shitty, while in that hole, while it's happening, and I'm, it's shitty then. Now that I'm out of it, it was life experience that was so profound, that was so shitty and crappy, that it helped shape me into who I am today, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I'm, not to pat myself on the back, I'm a strong enough person to have taken those situations and turned them into a strength and not a weakness. And that's one of the things, to kind of gush on you for a little bit, so I've known you now for I think like 6 or 7 years.
I would say something like that.
And in those 6 and 7 years, just looking at the JJ that I met versus the JJ that sits here now.
God, I just want to punch him right in the face. That's it.
I'm going to do that anyway. But the amount of personal growth, because the JJ that I met fully embodied everything that you just said. You let everybody treat you like shit. Everyone bossed you around. Everyone told you what to do. And the ironic part was you could kick the shit out of all of them. And that was the part that I always found fascinating, is you let everybody step all over you.
I think it's because I didn't know any other way.
Exactly.
Because growing up...
And that's 100%, and there is nothing wrong with that. But just watching in the few years that we've known each other, this progression that has come. You still have, I mean, because that's part of who you are. It's always going to be intrinsically part of you. But watching where you started to where you are now is, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the progress that you've made.
Oh, hug mama.
But that is, I guess, what I'm kind of getting at here is we all have a drip somewhere in our house, and it's causing rot. And some people will seek it out and try to stop the drip, or at least address the rot. And some people won't. Just
ignore. If the drip, I ignore the drip, it's not there.
Away.
I'll just, or to use a car analogy, because I'm guilty of this. If I hear a weird sound in my car, just turn the radio off.
Yep.
just grab that electrical tape and put it right over the check engine light.
Exactly. Look, it's not there anymore.
Yep. I didn't.
So I guess what I kind of want to get at as we're talking about this, there's always another chance to seek out the drip, to address the check engine light.
I remember you and I, we would, long time ago, we'd had like a lot of philosophical debate, not to make it too philosophical here, but you and I had like a long, extensive conversation about whether or not we think we have free will or not. And it's like, because you went to school for philosophy.
I dabbled, yeah.
Yeah, you dabbled in philosophy. So obviously your extension, your knowledge of philosophy definitely overstepped mine, but I was thinking, it's like, man, I think we do have free will. And you're like, well, funny you think that. Because and then we just kind of get in this thing, and it's like, I remember you kind of saying, like, even if we don't have free will, we still have a choice.
And it's true, because and every single day, to kind of get us back on topic here, every day, whether we're in the hole or we're not in the hole, we have a choice to address the hole. Even if we're in it, even if we're out of it.
Whether it is whether your state of being is nature versus nurture.
Exactly. We're all going to experience it. And that's something that I'm trying, it's my goal for this episode, is to really kind of show people that you're not alone.
Right.
We're unabashedly talking about experience it. You're not alone, not even a little bit. We all experience it, and it's okay.
Yeah, and something else to keep in mind too, and this analogy works really well. How did we hit that?
I don't know, but we're driving that one home.
Yeah, but another thing is that I think it's important to say is that you don't necessarily have to be the one to find the rot either. You can hire an insurance adjuster and they'll find it for you. No, I'm just so kidding. I'm so kidding. But no, what I'm saying is that you can have a contractor come in and help you find that rot. And the contractor in this analogy is friends, is therapy, is music, art. I don't know. I can't paint, but I mean, I would just like to throw like some colors on a canvas and be like, "Ha, that's my thing."
I'm sorry, I was just thinking this whole episode just became a thing to promote Tony's business. It's like, how did this turn into a bit?
But to build off of what you're saying, you're right. And one thing I'd like to add to your list too is sometimes we find our inspiration in those fictional worlds, which kind of ties into what I want to talk about next, which is, I know for me personally, without getting all into it, I mean, I'll take my turn real quick. My depression manifests itself in a very close combination of the two of you. So interesting, because this wasn't planned, but I have major abandonment issues because of my past. And one of the worst parts for me is my friends moving on to great things. So a really good friend of mine, Jess and August, when they moved, it was fantastic that they were moving on with their lives, they were going somewhere great, depressed the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
So I 100% agree with you. And in the same right, because I grew up poor and nothing, I had no friends, I too struggle with feeling that I'm good enough, which is hilarious for people who don't know me, because I come off so cocky. And I am a very self-confident person, but even with all that self-confidence,
there's still that hinged smidget of...
I mean, the case in point being, so I started my classwork to get my catastrophe adjusting license 4.5 months ago, and I finished all the classwork within like a month. And then all I had to do was take the test. And 3 months went by until last week I finally said enough is enough. And you know what? People ask me, Tony, why didn't you take the test? Like, what are you waiting for?
Yep.
The truth of the matter is what if I'm not good enough?
Mm-hmm.
I've been adjusting claims for, 7 years now? I've been in
You taught a
insurance
literal class.
Yeah, I taught a
about
college
it.
course on how to do it.
Yeah.
I have been in insurance since I left college, but all I could think of is what if I'm not good enough? What if I get deployed, I get down there, they throw buckets of work at me, and I crack and break.
Yep.
It was just it was easier to not take the test and to make up excuses on reasons not to take the test than to take it, get the license, and then have to address
Whatever
doing
comes.
That's
Yep.
exactly how I felt during my martial arts test for Muay Thai and the black belt that I eventually got. It was like, oh God, like I'm just gonna embarrass myself. I'm just gonna.
I'm just gonna put this away.
I know we're probably gonna talk about this whenever we do that martial arts episode we've been talking about, but I got the shit beat out of me for that Muay Thai test, and I somehow.
I was there. I was there. You got the shit beat out of you.
And you know what?
Can confirm.
And you know what? Back to you. You also got the shit beat out of you for yours. So
Eric's gigantic downward swat of my face.
Miller kicking me in the
Dude,
nuts.
Miller, Johnny Cage shadow kicked across the gym, was the only word I can use, and kicked you in the nuts so hard,
Well, first
you
he kicked
flew.
First he kicked me in the stomach, which knocked the wind out of me. Then he immediately followed that up with a kick to the groin.
Oh boy.
And I had to stand there and go, am I allowed to quit? No, I'm not allowed to quit. I have to keep going. So, but it's kind of funny because I remember, I think you were talking about like when you were first starting to learn how to play in a band, you didn't really want to get up on stage because that feeling like, am I good enough to play an instrument in front of people?
Every time. The first year and a half that I was at my job right out of college, man, I was just like, I should just quit wasting these people's time and just walk out this door. And I've been working the same job for 7.5 years now. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm in a leadership position, and like now all these other people are coming in and they're right off the chutes, and I'm like, can I do this? I don't know. Like,
You know, oddly enough,
it's hard.
I never had a confidence issue with driving truck stick shift because I never wanted to do it. That's exactly what I remember. I never wanted to learn to drive truck, but it's because I'm like, I just became a natural. I was like, this is bullshit. I hate doing this. But it's like, but you're so good at it. Yeah, but it's bullshit. And I hate it, and I don't want to do it anymore.
But anyway,
You become confident at the things you hate doing.
Yeah.
yeah, and until it comes time to be met with something new, and then your confidence is shook once again.
Right.
So to kind of zip into what I want to get into next, which is and we're going to do the nice little round robin thing.
Mm-hmm.
What is a fandom? It can be as specific or general as you like, that you really connect with helping you survive your time in the hole.
I mean, the one that really comes to mind, because it's been part of my life now for, oh God, a long time. How long have I been playing D&D? Is D&D. And the beautiful part about D&D being a role-playing game, which for those of you who don't know, it's a tabletop role-playing game where you sit around a table with a bunch of your nerdy friends and you roll dice and you play out campaign scenarios.
Far too complicated, not getting you.
I know, that's fine. You roll a lot of ones and you do a lot of really terrible things. But, for me, D&D, because it is a role-playing game, you essentially get to do what you would do in a video game scenario, except for it's a lot more freeform. So it's almost like Skyrim, but with a personality attached to it. I don't know. I'm just going to stop that right now. But, like, for D&D, you can play your characters, and you can give them backstories, and you can do a lot of things in D&D that obviously you can't do in the real world because it's a fictional world, obviously. So I find that a lot of my... And this is kind of funny, I was thinking about this on the way here. A lot of my characters have parent problems. They either are missing a parent, or they are an orphan, or they have some sort of, like, connection with that where they don't know their parents. Any combination of that. And honestly, out of the plethora of characters that I've made, there's probably at least 7 or 8 that have that scenario to them. I'm like, wow, like, why do I do this? And I don't even mean to do it. It just kind of happens. So I think it's really played a role throughout the years of exploring pieces of my life that are, before I started therapy, uncomfortable to really have a conversation about. Dealing with the abandonment thing, dealing with, you get it's almost like, hey, I have this friend who, ... continue
Exactly.
the story, and you get to experience that with yourself. So, I think that's my...
It's kind of like the ultimate empowerment fantasy.
Yeah.
Because it is, and it's...
Slay those dragons.
And there is an episode coming specifically about that soon.
Yeah.
Or may have already been posted. I'm not sure which.
Whatever-
What order
whatever
this
appears on the
episode is
timeline.
going to be put in, but there is a episode dedicated to D&D with my good friend Lou coming.
Yeah.
So what about you? What is a fandom, whether generic or specific, that you connect with to help you during your time in the hole?
Do you remember growing up with Toonami on?
Oh, God, yes.
Cartoon? God, I remember
Yeah.
Toonami. That was back then. For anybody who doesn't know, and I can't imagine anybody who's our age that doesn't know. Toonami was pretty much the only way that you could really watch anime other than going to the Blockbuster or somewhere.
Getting
and
the Funimation
I know, and then like
VHS cassettes,
exactly.
man.
Before
Yeah.
before there was Crunchyroll, you
Yep.
either had Toonami or you went to the Blockbuster and you asked the weird guy across the
gosh.
counter, "What's a good anime?"
There's an antiquated sentence.
Exactly.
I went up to the payphone and called the Blockbuster to ask him about the VHS tape
Gosh.
that I forgot to rewind. Okay, anyway.
This was before streaming services were a thing?
So I remember
Oh,
growing up
gosh.
watching Toonami, and I mean, again, like they had Dragon Ball Z, they had Cowboy Bebop, with just these awesome shows from
Wolfrain,
afar.
Samurai Champloo.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Gundam
Yes.
Wing.
Yep.
And but one that really attracted me was One Piece. I don't know if you guys know One Piece. Or
I'm
not.
aware of what it is, but I've never watched it myself.
It's such a fantastic show. But basically, the reason why it attracted me to it was that, because we're talking about depression specifically, there's a character on the show, Monkey D. Luffy. He's the main character. He's the rubber man. He's the guy... He's the guy that beats the shit out of everybody. But the entire show, he's just so strangely optimistic about everything. Just everything and everybody. And his whole thing is that he's just there to help his friends who are in need. Because funny, like, the one character on the show, Nico Robin, she basically wants to commit suicide. And he doesn't let her. Because it's like he just wants her to live. Even before like they became like deep friends, he was pretty much helping her out of her like her depressive state and her backstory and everything. It's such a good show. I highly recommend it.
I've never seen it.
The one thing though, it was kind of funny to me because I had a relationship that was very terrible. To the point where, and not again, this is graphic warning. Don't listen if you don't like hearing this kind of stuff. I was in a relationship where the girlfriend I was with at the time held a knife to herself every time that she felt like in distress, and that really traumatized me. And it kind of came back to that whole idea of everything's my fault. If somebody's doing something, it's because of something I did, and like that, it's all my fault. She's hurting herself because of me. Even though that's really not the case.
No. And oftentimes it was probably her way of trying to make you feel that way.
Pretty much. But it's kind of funny because in the show there's another character, Nami, who at some point in her lowest point, she has a tattoo of this pirate crew that she hates dearly. She's only in it because she's trying to basically pay for this town so that those pirates can leave them alone. It's a really good storyline. But basically at her lowest point, she takes a knife and she starts like cutting at the tattoo, and for some reason I'm like, oh God, I don't want to watch this part because it's triggering that whole memory of trauma and everything. But even then, like the whole show just kind of really like put me in this. It's like maybe I can be optimistic too, like that Monkey D. Luffy, like the rubber man. I can be like the rubber man, and I can start thinking more about. Like how we were talking about like that second voice in our heads about trying to direct us to a different way. I think maybe that was kind of the start of like maybe you should think about yourself differently instead of like all this negative stuff that you keep telling yourself. Maybe you should start feeding in some good along with the bad to kind of even the scales out.
I mean, it's a good lesson. It's a very good lesson.
Like I said, I highly recommend it for anybody who hasn't. Although you will waste a century watching the show because it's still going on to this day.
Oh jeez.
Each season's like 100 episodes, and there's like 20 episodes. It's the one. It's like on record for like one of the longest running animes in history.
So, as far as mine, obviously, I'm sure I could talk for days. I'm thinking about, and I think one interesting fandom is fantasy fiction for me. And I can particularly think about, this was a period in time where my dad, who had multiple sclerosis, it was bad after he got MS because he kind of started hating the world and I was his focal point. But this would have been a period, this was during the time where he and I's relationship was probably at its worst. My Grammy had died, and I had to go to her funeral. And I was in, I want to say 9th, maybe 10th. No, I would have been, because I was in Wimber at the time, so it would have probably been like 10th grade. And we had those ABC points. I don't know if you guys had those at your school. You had to read a certain amount of points every semester. You had to read classics. And
I may remember something like that,
I did
but
the
I don't
book it
think...
program when I was a kid.
I was in sped ed. I had to fight to get into pre-algebra, if you remember.
So I had to do my ABC points because they were coming up due. Because she died right before Christmas break. And I wasn't much of a reader then. I had yet to discover D&D. I had yet to really discover Star Wars at that point. Like, I knew Star Wars, but not like I know Star Wars now. And fantasy fiction, particularly the author R.A. Salvatore, was my entry point. And right over there, you can see I've got my Dristo Erden and my Guinevere pops. Because it was actually his series, his characters, the Companions of the Hall. And I, of course, I didn't know this. I just went to the library and I just started looking at book covers to something that would intrigue me. And I came across 2 books that would fulfill, they were worth enough points to fulfill whatever requirement I needed. And they were The Legacy and Starless Night. And I'm like, okay, these covers look cool. Now, in hindsight, anyone who's interested in reading R.A. Salvatore, he's an amazing author, does some of the best fight scenes on a page that you'll ever encounter. But that's smack dab in the middle of the series at the time for what was out.
Whoops.
Yeah. So and then, of course, I got The Legacy and Starless Night. What did I read first? Starless Night, which comes after The Legacy. So I'm reading this book.
Sort of like George Lucas. Let's put out episode 4, 5, and 6
Except
first.
there was no crawl at the beginning trying to give me some context.
You had no recap.
No recap. So I'm reading about this Dristo Erden, and I'm like, I like this guy. I don't know who all these other people are he's talking to. And they keep talking about this Wolfgar. And I'm like, what the fuck is a Wolfgar? But I was captivated. I devoured that book. And then, of course, when I read The Legacy, it was like, oh, they're talking about all of this stuff. And then I look at the beginning of the book. I'm like, oh, shit, look at that. This is the middle of the series.
I clearly
picked the wrong entry point. So, but those books, particularly, I mean, I think I have a lot in common with a lot of the Companions of the Hall, which are the main characters of his books. But Dristo Erden, which is his primary protagonist, is one that at the time I felt a lot of kinship to. So Drist was an outcast. He was a dark elf. In this world, pretty much all of the dark elves are evil. They all live underground. They're all just some bad dudes. Then there's Drist, who's good, and left to live in the surface world. Which in doing so, he had a lot of innate, so Drow have innate magical abilities. He lost all of them being out in the daylight. So he's now in a world that everyone at the time thinks he's this evil piece of shit because he's a Drow, and all Drow are evil pieces of shit.
Right.
So he was this outcast who the world looked down upon, even though he had a good heart. His only friend for the longest time was this Black Panther called Guinevere, who he could summon from this little magical statue. And then he finally meets the other companion, who will eventually become the Companions of the Hall, which is like this crotchety old dwarf, his adopted human daughter, this young, brash, arrogant, big motherfucker named Wolfgar. I finally figured out who he was. He was a human barbarian. This halfling, cunning little fast talker named Regis. So, like, it was my first foray into anything fantasy related, or really anything of anything, because I mean I'd read stuff, but it was all like school required reading and none of it ever kicked home. I
Right.
could care less about the classics and shit, but this kind of transported me to a world unlike it. And within 2 years I had read everything my library had on R.A. Salvatore, and then as soon as I devoured all of that, I dived into Dragonlance, and then I got into that, and it was like this perpetual thing that catapulted me to this whole world of fiction and all these and just lessons. I mean, and that's, to me, I try to pull lessons from everything. And so for me, that fandom that really kind of helped me in some of my deepest, darkest holes was fantasy fiction. Yeah, anyway, so we're going to kind of wrap this up before we get into my closing questions. We're going to wrap this up with, what are some of the ways you, and we've talked about this some already, and we'll go around the table again. What are some of the ways or some tips that you could give the people who are watching / listening to this for moving on? What are some of your tips for getting out of the hole?
Oh boy. So it's funny, as I was thinking about this too, because I thought that maybe this was going to come up. I'm guessing you're starting with me. Sorry.
Of course.
So I think my biggest advice is, when things are good, establish one thing that you can hold on to when things are bad. So, for example, when I would have, those suicidal thoughts would come, it was one of those, I had one friend that her and I have been best friends for 20 years now, who there's never been any sort of judgment. We've always, she's been like my rock, thick and thin. Like, her and I come from similar childhoods. We come from similar, like, we are very kindred spirits. And, the one thing that kept me, like, at my darkest moment, that kept me, at least seeing the light, even though it was way off in the darkness, is, calling her and saying, and being like, I gotta be there for her. And, like, she will, if I leave this world, she'll be alone. And which is it's a weird thing to think of somebody else when you're in that darkness. Because usually when you're in that darkness, the world is completely pitch black, right? But I had that little glimmer of light, and I reached out, and she was very much like, "Are you okay? Do you want me to come over?" And that kind of led to, me getting help. And so when you are in a good place, write it down. Maybe if you're a tactile person, or if you need that kind of thing to pull you out, write it down somewhere. Your one thing that you can turn to, whether it be a statement of self, like, you're a good person, or
It's called a self-affirmation.
Yes, thank you. I was like, what is the word? I'm bad with words sometimes. Either like some words of affirmation. Have a friend that you can call, and when you're in your good spot, have that conversation with your friend and say, listen, I struggle with this. Can I lean on you when my time is dire for help? Because you don't want to just assume that person's going to be there, because that's weight. That's a lot of weight. And obviously your friends sometimes will, it's like an unspoken pact kind of thing. And they're like, yeah, like, you're my ride or die kind of situation. I will do anything to help you whenever. So it's always good to kind of be, if you can, have that conversation with your friend. But if not, have their phone number on a sticky note somewhere, anywhere. That's, on your mirror, in your journal, something that's visible that you can kind of tie yourself to say, I'm in the dark, here's a flashlight. And find that outlet. That's pretty much my biggest piece of advice, because when you need that flashlight, it's there. And you never think of the flashlight when you're in the dark.
Yeah.
So you want to do that when you're feeling good and you're like, yeah, things are solid. And like we said in the beginning, the number, don't be afraid to ever call that number. There are plenty of resources, both local and national, that you can call and you can talk to people. They're called lifelines for a reason.
Damn right.
So that's kind of my top number one piece of advice, because I have a list, but that was like the biggest one.
So what about you, JJ? What is one of your tips for helping surviving your time in the hole, to help get you out of it? And I mean, it can be one or the other too, because it doesn't need to be a tip to get out of it. It could just be a tip to survive when you're in it.
Yeah. Just half the time, that's more or less how I just kind of feel when I'm in. And like I said, I just call them episodes. I don't think that I'm somebody with full-fledged depression, or at least maybe not anymore.
Right.
Or people who have severe depression that actually need medication and all that. I think. Well, first of all, don't just listen to me. Go get actual professionals that are experienced and know what they are talking about, and and pretty much have base careers in establishing this sort of issue. Really, for me, I don't want to be the typical guy to be like, oh, just go get a hobby, because that's very rude and it's very demeaning to say to somebody who is going through depression. It's like, oh, you just need to do something to get your mind off of it. Well, that's not always the case.
But remember, this is a tip that helps you.
Yeah.
Because who knows? Maybe there's thousands of people out there listening who this could help. So what helps you?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just... This is gonna probably sound rude. Just clean the house. Just do something. Like, I always find, like, a lot of times when I'm in my most depressive states, it's like how we were saying, where you don't shower, you don't talk, you don't go outside, you don't do anything. And I think I say a lot of times therapists are just trying to get their patients to take a shower. And that's pretty much as long as you can take a shower, you're at least stepping towards getting out of that darkness and stepping more towards the light. So I think a lot of times, like, just doing something that I know I'm going to feel better about doing afterward. Just mowing the grass, cleaning the dishes or whatnot. It's like, I'm going to feel good after doing it. Doing a workout. Nobody feels bad after doing a workout.
Yeah. Not if it was a good workout.
Yeah. Yeah. Even just going for like a 30-minute walk. Like, nobody feels bad. I've never gone for a walk and thought, like, God, that was such a waste of my time. I never should have gone to... I always reflect, and I feel so much better after just going on that walk. So, I mean, I guess I would say just do something, anything, even if it's just something little. Mm-hmm. Just something little that you really enjoy doing, or something that you know that you're just going to feel better if you just do it.
So, you both kind of stole my answer. You stole it first. You stole my backup.
Sorry, not sorry.
Because, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because fuck Tony.
That just goes to show that we're very like-minded individuals.
Yeah, fuck Tony.
So, the two pieces, and that's okay because I've got a third, but the two pieces I was going to build upon was having that anchor. Mm-hmm. Which is what I refer to it as.
That's
having the anchor to reality. Mm-hmm. When you get thrown in the hole, you know that there is something up there with a rope that maybe you're not strong enough to pull yourself out, but that rope is there and it's anchored topside. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is, I love the quote from Finding Nemo. Just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming.
I mean, I cannot tell you how many times that's my advice, my go-to advice for most people when they're like, I'm depressed, I don't want to do anything. I say, just go fucking do it. If it's a workout, just get your ass to the gym. Even if you walk in there, you don't do anything, you turn around, you walk out, chances are getting there, starting is the hardest part of any endeavor.
100%.
Doing this podcast. Pressing?
That's a new word.
Words are apparently hard as well.
Pressing record and speaking is the hardest part of the whole endeavor. Mm-hmm. So now that I've just touched upon what you guys already talked about, mine is going to be, if you're having a hard time, and this is going to sound almost counterproductive, go out and be of service to someone. Help someone.
Okay. I like that.
It doesn't matter what you do for them. Someone says, hey, buddy, can you make me a sandwich? Mm-hmm. just do it. To me personally, helping someone, bringing a smile to someone else's face, getting a genuine laugh,
Yeah.
that is more therapeutic to me than almost anything.
Help that crackhead get his fix for the day.
No.
No, not that.
Not that.
But
No.
being of service to someone,
Yep.
that is one thing as a society we've all kind of lost touch with, and especially having
with
just
the
come
past-
back to the U.S. I'm not America bashing by any means, but the U.S. in general, we're not really big on talking about putting other people first, but
No.
there is a huge
Even though it's literally
bonus.
on the bottom of
Yes.
the Statue of Liberty.
but doing that, putting someone else, some other cause, something else before yourself can help you get out of some of the darkest places you'll ever get to. So that's my tip, is to make someone smile, make someone laugh, even if you can't. Now, yeah, Robin Williams, rest in peace, buddy. Perfect example. He couldn't smile himself, so he made everyone else smile. And I'm sure that when he was doing it, it helped him.
Yeah.
Just didn't help him enough.
But I feel like we all kind of do that. I'm pretty sure, like, a lot of times whenever we tell dark jokes to each other, or especially, like, in the past, I'm sure, like, there was times where we've, told we told a dork joke.
Dork
Arg,
joke?
dark, and dark.
Yeah, a dork.
Apparently,
joke.
I'm a goblin. We told dark jokes to kind of hide and cover up, like, a little bit of...
And you're
that.
absolutely right, but also keep in mind that that's just who we are.
Yeah.
This isn't about who we are. This is about the people that maybe don't know how.
But I also feel like a lot of times when I told those dark jokes, and like even if I may have been hiding a lot of my own like suicidal tendencies, all I wanted was a Pepsi. Dang, right there. I always feel like even me telling those jokes also helped me.
And it does, and it
Yes.
does, absolutely, because it comes back to humor is a great way of pulling oneself. Because oftentimes, when we're in that hole and it feels like it's so deep, we're in Buffalo Bill's basement, the reality of the situation is we're probably just standing in an inch of water. But, it's that old adage, you can drown to death in an inch of water. Because all it takes is not realizing that all you have to do is raise your head. So, and sometimes cracking a joke and making someone smile or making someone laugh or just doing something genuinely good, nice for someone is oftentimes enough to give you that perspective to realize, oh shit, this hole's not as deep as I thought. So we're going to wrap this up with kind of a modified version of the questions I ask all my guests. And again, we're going to go round table here. Bethany, if you could go back in time to a version of yourself
Oh, God.
who was struggling with depression, that's the modifier, with depression, what would you say to that person? To you, what would you say to that version of yourself?
Oh, boy. God. Probably that it's 100% okay to feel bad. And to be nicer to yourself about feeling bad. Because we kind of touched about this earlier, like, I tend to feel bad about feeling bad.
Yes.
Which is such a weird thing.
It's that cycle of emotion.
So I think the what I would tell younger me, oh dear, poor younger me, like it's okay to feel bad, and just because today is bad doesn't mean tomorrow is going to be bad, and you don't have to be ashamed. Here we go. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are, because who you are is a freaking awesome person. You struggled when you were a kid. You've grown through it. You become self-reliant. You are strong. You are kind. You are loyal. You are, a great person. Like, don't beat yourself up, because you are who you are, and your past is your past, and that's okay. You do not have to be ashamed of it. I think that's the biggest thing. Like the whole product of your environment thing. it's okay to be a product of your environment, and that's nothing you have to be ashamed of. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are. That's the TLDR version. I apologize. I kind of went in a little
God,
bit.
can you just go back in time and tell my version of myself that instead?
All right,
It's a thing.
JJ, you're on the hot seat. Same
Yep.
question. You could go back to any version of yourself from the past who was going through a hard time with depression.
God, I feel
What
like,
would you say to him?
God, I feel like I would have that scene from what is that movie with Robin Williams and Matt Damon?
What, Good Will Hunting?
Goodwill Hunting. I feel like it's just gonna be that scene from Goodwill Hunting of like, it's not your fault. Shut up. It's not your fault. Stop. It's not your fault. It would just be over and over again. It's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Except my version would be far more like grabbing the scruff of my shirt.
It's not your fault.
It's not your fault. Just let it go. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people hear that enough of like, yeah, you went through shit. It doesn't mean it was your fault that you went through it. It's not your fault.
It's a hard lesson to... I mean,
It's a hard lesson to accept, let alone hear.
and also depending on the type of people, like I'm the kind of person who takes the world on my shoulders. So
Oh,
if
same here.
someone, especially me, if you know, it's hard not to take that shit personal. It's hard not to take take on responsibility that's not necessarily your own.
Mm-hmm.
So that is pretty much it for our episode. I appreciate both of you guys taking the time out of your day to come on. Again, for all of you out there, I hope some of this resonated with you guys. I hope it helped. Again, if you're experiencing any kind of suicidal thoughts, if you're just having a hard time, remember the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's there to help. It's 1-800-273-8255. Don't hesitate to call if you need it. There's nothing wrong with getting help.
And you're not alone.
Not at all.
Not alone.
Not
There's
at all.
literally millions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Millions of people.
Feel free to go ahead and drop me a line, shoot me an email. You can find me on Facebook. It's The Grey Path. That's GREY. Send me a message. Even if you just need somebody to talk to. It's why we're all here. It really is. I'm still working on getting the YouTube channel up and running. Hopefully by the time this video posts, it will be ready. So you can actually watch this video and not just listen to the audio.
Yeah.
And again, that is The Grey Path, TheGreyPath, The Grey Path, and that's on YouTube. I'm working on getting that channel up and running. You can email me at seekthegreypath@gmail.com. That's seekthegreypath@gmail.com. As always, I'm your host, Tony B. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you all stay safe out there.